I'm not sure what to make of chapter 11.
I kind of had a feeling that this one would be a more difficult one to kind of abstract with the whole premise of the series. Just again to reiterate in case someone happens to join in randomly at this point, right? Um, the whole premise was whether or not there was anything in the red letters, quote unquote, of the Bible that would contradict the idea or concept of being a good person. And when you take it to be that basic, I think chapter 11 just kind of fits with yes, there's nothing contradictory. But I do want to take it a step further than that
Okay.
because I don't think it's quite that simple. I think there's a good message here, even outside the scope of choosing to follow the Christian religion in this case, where a lot of what is being talked about is to profess those things that you see as good to others, and be sure to provide what the rationale or reasoning is. Um, that can be kind of difficult to translate when you think about the source material being a religious text and what that means for trying to take it a step back and apply it to just living life in general outside of the framework of a specific religion. Because a lot of the verses do specifically reference things like, the deaf hear, dead raised, poor told the good news, etc., where you can make it very supernatural esque. But the core message, I think, can be boiled down more to this belief is what it means to be a good person. And I am acting as a messenger of this belief. And overall adherence to this belief will bring us to a point of, um, I don't want to say nirvana or euphoria or perfection, because none of those things, those have their own connotations.
Right.
Following this idea will lead to a positive result. Feels like it undersells it, though. So something in between those extremes, right? There's um, an adherence to being a good person that not only creates positive outcomes for those immediately around you, but creates a positive environment as well. And that's more the way I would attempt to uh, generalize what's provided here in Matthew 11, or at least at the beginning of Matthew 11, in a non focused Christian framework. Hopefully that makes sense.
I think so. I think I understand that.
And then as Matthew goes on, I think that interpretation gets to be maybe more clear, more focused when thinking about the ideas that are portrayed in the different stories that follow, where you have a an emphasis on a generation that didn't acknowledge what was being provided, and then uh, within that section you have like the example given is we played the flute but you didn't dance, we sang a lament but you didn't mourn. It's bringing this idea, bringing this philosophy, bringing this belief forward, and really trying to explain what that means and it going unnoticed. And part of where it becomes um, I don't know if that's the right phrasing. I kind of want to uh, part of where that transitions to the next portion is talking about, we brought this stuff forward and you didn't pay attention, and then taking it a step further, we came because you didn't pay attention. We get to this point where we're weary, we're burdened, we need rest, And at this point, we kind of withdraw and retract and refocus ourselves on this core fundamental idea of being a decent person, and that helps to rekindle the spirit. And so Matthew 11 is kind of really a story that tells you, continuing from Matthew 10, we're talking about how divisive some things can be. Matthew 11, I think, tries to explain how not only will things become divisive, but you'll be so happy and wanting to spread this thing, this idea, this belief, and so passionate about it that you'll try and it'll go unnoticed, and you'll get beat down and weary, and you'll question whether it's worth continuing. And then what makes it worth continuing is the thing itself, right? This idea, this just core belief that makes things better. Because even though your current situation doesn't bear the fruit of what that should be in your mind, you know full well that this belief is worth living and dying for, and that belief is what creates a better tomorrow. I'm not going to lie, it's a difficult chapter to try to take by itself and drive a non-focused, very Christian teaching out of.
Yeah. I agree. When I was reading through it, I had like, I couldn't find anything applicable to what I was thinking of for this. I thought about, I guess it goes, I guess, the thought I had about it when I was initially reading it was that, it's certainly like speaking inwardly, to his own followers instead of a, some of the broad discussion or broad messages that he's had. But it talks a lot about Judgment Day, and so it just, the question here is that, or rather that what I feel is understood is that Judgment Day is a thing that's going to happen. Like, there's no questioning about Judgment Day. There's no convincing that there will be a Judgment Day. It's like, this is a known occurrence that will happen. And so then I'm like, it takes me down the road of the fundamentals of Christianity, and it's like, why is there a Judgment Day?
So it might be easier to reframe that into eventually there will be a day when things cease to exist. Just simple enough. There is some catastrophic event that will eventually end life as we know it.
We can all accept that.
Yeah. Worst case scenario, it's a few million years and the sun consumes the earth, and we're not a spacefaring race, and so we are wiped out. I mean, hopefully we're a spacefaring race by that point, but again, there are plenty of ways you could take an idea that there will be a catastrophic event that will eventually wipe out humanity as we know it.
If we can harken back to the Fermi paradox, there is the great strainer.
Yes.
I think, or the great, is it the great? I'm trying to. Is it the great strainer? There's some event that will happen that we either, if we're lucky, we have passed it, or if we're unlucky, we're about to go through it, and we may or may not pass it. But the great filter, not the strainer, the great filter.
Yeah, I mean, it is. So it's funny because it goes also hand in hand with the what was the actual phrasing? The generational turnings.
Yes.
And we've talked about that before, but 2020 was a massive year for change in humanity. I'm sure it won't be the last.
Right.
There are plenty of different things that we can point to as being precursors for what could be to come. And so Christians get hung up on this idea of Judgment Day because that's what the Bible talks about. And that's what they feel has to be indicative of what is to come. Realistically, though, Terminator 2 had a Judgment Day where it was apocalyptic because of robots taking control of the world and destroying humanity.
Self-awareness.
Judgment Day itself can take on whatever form it takes on. If you think of it strictly within the framework of Christianity's view of Judgment Day, okay, you've narrowed down, cataclysmic events to a very small subset of specific events that you expect to happen. I'm not so sure that's the wise way to take it, because realistically, there are a lot of things that can cause the downfall of large swaths of humanity prior to even getting to anything outlined as a specific concept in the framework of what Christians view as Judgment Day. So let's just broaden that a little bit to be humanity will cease to exist in the way that we know it exists today. And it will continue to evolve and change over time. And it may or may not be a net positive or net gain. It might be the almost complete obliteration of humanity. Wherever that falls in the continuum, you could still have a concept of a Judgment Day after that, or maybe even before that. Nothing is negating that that's a possibility with regard to these teachings. It's just that this section should also acknowledge that other events can act as a cataclysmic event as well.
It's fun.
I was trying to think of something else I could follow that up with, but I don't know that I have another way to spin it.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's fun to think about this because, it's easy for me to be like, yeah, the Fermi paradox, the great filter, and then look at Christianity like the Judgment Day and be like, nah, and poo-poo all over that. It's not any different. I mean, I think what people believe is going to happen is very different, but fundamentally it's the same concept.
Yeah, it's funny. Just taking a step back and thinking about how I've attempted to describe my viewpoints. I don't think I ever actually describe it in a way that is appropriate, because I think there's always this, but you have some identification or attachment to Christianity, and so that's what this means. Like there's a label attached there that influences the interpretation regardless of whether the words match the interpretation. And I find that fascinating because the only reason I apply Christianity as a label is because it's the framework I grew up with and know of a way to translate between what I believe and what other people interpret those things to be.
It's being understood. You're being understood.
Well, it's attempting to be understood.
Yeah.
But I think that's where it actually falls short. Because I could care less what the label is. And this is where I want to make the distinction. I believe there is some supernatural force in some way that has an impact on our lives that we don't understand. And that's kind of the extent of it. I
mean, could that supernatural force be the same supernatural force that people attribute to horoscopes and the stars?
It could. I mean, it could be. It could be nature in and of itself, and that alone. It could be what people attribute to God or Allah or any of the Egyptian gods or the Greek gods or the Roman gods. Like, take your pick, right? Like,
yeah.
For me, it doesn't matter the name you attach. For me, what matters is there are things I can't explain that I think I can attribute to something beyond understanding that has a guiding influence. That doesn't mean that it's omnipotent, omniscient, all-knowing, and everything else. I just use the labels of God and the framework of Christianity to explain it in a way that I think screws up the explanation.
Oh, I get that. I get that. And it kind of makes me think of the premise to the movie Prometheus.
Yeah, I could see that.
Where it's like, when I was watching that, that was around the time right after I felt like that I had properly completed my disengagement from religion. And, you could look at that and say, yeah, it's really easy to say ancient man encountered an alien species that was so far advanced. Actually, in the movie, the alien species created man. So it's really, and, visited man. So it's really easy for primitive, to think, for primitive man to attribute that to a deity or, a supernatural being. Because it's like, so I guess the question is, it's like, is it supernatural because you don't currently have a different explanation for it? Or do you think there is something that is actually outside of the natural?
So, and this is why I think the framework discussion that I've used ends up making it inadequate, because realistically, you could view my predominant views as being Taoist fairly squarely, because one of the core tenets is that it might be a lack of understanding, and it might be something that is actually legitimately a supernatural thing. I don't really care, because it doesn't change my behavior. It doesn't change what I'm attempting to attain, what I'm trying to reach, what I'm trying to do. I don't care how we describe it. I don't care how we label it. I don't care which set of teachings, as long as they're still focused on being a better person that we want to allude to or adhere to or anything else. All of the minutiae is completely irrelevant. What matters is I need to be empathetic and loving toward those around me, and I need to continue to try to be better. And trying to be better brings me closer to this better existence, which is the purpose of life in and of itself. And there's nothing about that that rules out a supernatural influence, and there's nothing about that that says that it's just supernatural because we don't understand it.
They're almost separate.
They're separate from a standpoint of how you identify it from a research and classification perspective, but they're not separate from a viewpoint of I'm trying to be better, and I'm living better by these ideas and ideals, and I'm drawing closer to becoming this better version of me that can exist because of this idea of drawing closer to a state of positive presence, maybe, for lack of a better word. The Buddhists call it enlightenment. I like to use the term as well because I think it's a nice broad term that captures the idea of being closer to something that you don't necessarily have a reason to explain, but you know you want to be closer to it.
It's a very far cry from the Christianity that I grew up with.
Well, it is.
I feel like
what makes it hilarious is that it's not a far cry from the Christianity that's actually taught if you look at the Bible.
Well, that's the whole point of what we're talking about. Because I was going to say, it's not that far off from my beliefs. So
right, it's not a far cry at all from Jesus, completely epitomized by how you interpret his attributed quotes and teachings and all directly. It's a far cry from is the evangelical church that we have come to know and love.
So, do you believe Jesus was a deity?
This is why I use Christianity as the vocabulary for understanding the framework, because I believe there is some sort of presence that exists that is not human, that is, I wouldn't necessarily say it's superior, but influencing life as we know it. That could very well be aliens. It could very well be a deity. Like the point is that I don't really care what that presence is.
Okay.
Excuse me. But I use the example of God because that's what people understand.
I feel like if somebody was knocking on your door and you gave them that answer, they would be pressing you for something else, and that's why I'm going to be like, no, I accept that answer. Like I totally accept that answer.
Well, it's because most people are not comfortable with an undefined variable.
That's right. That's right.
And to me, and this is part of why I've adopted this viewpoint. If you have all of the major religions giving you a general instructional about living life a certain way, and you have all these other philosophies giving you a general instructional about living life a certain way, and they all agree on how you should be empathetic to others and compassionate and helping and et cetera, like all the things that we've talked about being a better person. I'm not stupid enough to think that it has to have a label. And that's the problem. Most people have to label what that is. They have to pick one of the denominations. Something has to be clear and concise and 100% black and white. That's it. And I disagree with that interpretation wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and I want to like even like go as far to say and defend that it's not coming from a place of stupidity, but a place of comfort, and because humans are creatures that desire a certain level of protection, and this there's something comfortable about being able to define something that we can understand, even if we define something. It was like, we understand that this is a thing that we can't understand. So there's some level of understanding that's gained from that gives people comfort in being able to categorize it and put it in a box somewhere. Whereas your undefined answer is difficult for people.
I can agree with that because that's one thing. I know we've talked about it before. Like one of the few things that I really, really attach a strong emphasis to is comfort with the undefinable, because that's what generates the ability to walk through life and not be judgmental on the spot. Like once you accept that there are things you can't explain, there are things you can't understand, there are things that you are going to have no clue how to put that in a framework that relates to your life experiences. It doesn't make it good or bad. It just makes it different. It makes it something to either try to understand or simply accept as I do not have the capacity to understand. And that second statement, that latter piece, is what most people cannot do. Or maybe cannot do is overly simplistic. Most people do not have a way to do so.
Or they don't want to push themselves out of their comfort zone to do that. And I don't know if that comes off as a negative statement. I merely mean it as a characteristic statement. It has no value. I'm attaching no judgment or value to it. It is just describing what is.
Yes, and that acknowledgement further describes and acknowledges and encompasses the problem that most people have.
It's ironic. It's ironic though, because it's that the Christian that wants to define their religion down to the denomination is taking sort of a scientific approach, or at least the basis for a scientific approach, and wanting to categorize, characterize, define, understand, rather than being okay with the undefined. Right.
And to take a step, the part that I love about it is to take it just a slight step further. The Christian who wants to do that misses the bulk of the ideas presented, which are showing compassion and being neighborly and being friendly and helping those around them, because that's what it means to be a Christian.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after-show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.